part of my problem is how many of you were here in this room just before lunch? Can I just see a show of hands? I'm reminded of the Tommy Cooper moment when he was appearing at a Royal Society performance, and he heard a young comedian rehearsing in the afternoon before the performance in the evening, and he heard some very good jokes from this young comedian, and he happened to be on before the young comedian that evening, at which point he delivered every single one of this young comedian's jokes, and then said, "Now I'd like to introduce you to one of the funniest people I know." And this poor young comedian comes out and has no material to give whatsoever. Because a lot of what I want to talk about has echoes of what you've heard today earlier, and in particular on project management. So one of the things that I do try and do is follow the brief. And so we're talking about law firm pricing and profitability. We've talked about the client's view. Let's just talk for a bit about these areas from the flyer that you got. How can firms defend and improve margins, and how can they scope and cost matters and price jobs and measure profitability, etc. But what I want to do is just give you a bit of a background. This is actually quite a recent survey. 10% of law firm leaders think law firms will take the lead in reinventing the legal market. That means 90% don't. I think there's an opportunity there for those of us who do actually make changes and try and anticipate what the client wants. 39% of firms are making significant changes in the efficiency, but 90% think it's a market shift. What are the... I can't do the maths, but 90 minus 39 is quite a large number of people who recognise that something's changing and aren't actually doing anything about it. 16% of firms are finding ways of making fixed price matters more profitable. That's quite an achievement. But what's happening to the others? Are you actually seeing law firm profitability decreasing because you've got 84% of them who aren't doing anything? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. 43% are offering training in project management, and for want of a better way of describing it, I'm still calling it project management. If during the course of this talk anyone has a better phraseology that is more acceptable to lawyers, please come up and tell me afterwards, because I've been struggling with that for about the last 5 years. And you use those two words together in front of a lawyer and their eyes glaze over. I'm afraid it's very, very difficult. So how can firms defend and improve their margins? Well, I hesitate to put this slide up in front of such a sophisticated audience, but it is amazing how even within groups you don't get people asking these correct fundamental questions. And it's exactly the point you've just been making. Are you actually going to provide high-value services, or are you actually going to provide commodity? You can't do both. So are you acting for the right clients? Are you providing what you want at a price you're willing to pay, and that's sufficiently profitable for us? Of course, I argue that law firms have a margin of 0, because once the partner's been paid out, there is no money left. So we'd love 4%. And are we structured to deliver as efficiently as possible? Do we have the people, the systems, the locations, the analysis? A lot of those we have. I suggest that actually probably one of the areas where we fall down most is we don't have the last. We don't have the attitude about training that we should have. And however much we train, it's very difficult to change that attitude. I love the reference this morning to humility, trying to get lawyers to have a little more humility. Again, if anyone has any ideas on that, please do come and tell me afterwards. I'm humble enough to accept advice on that one. So, profitable business. We're talking about, you talked about the supply chain, and I think too often we're only looking at one aspect of this, and we need to look at everything. We look at the demand chain and the supply chain. And Sorry, forgive me, but this Hilton network keeps inviting me to rejoin it, and it's a bit frustrating. But I think that the key to what we need to be doing goes back to what we were listening before lunch. And a lot about training. And it's also about how you analyse and how you present the information. I'm going to come back in a moment to talking about how we present the information. But looking at it on a matter level and just reminding people what it is you talked about, 5 things. The trouble is they start focusing on the numbers and they start focusing on the charging rate, the recovery rate, etc. And I'm saying that, in fact, what really matters to your profitability at a matter level, let's put aside those macro levels for a moment, it's also about your negotiating skill and your project management skills. And so in terms of practical examples of having sort of come to this conclusion, what did we actually do? What did we actually do at Ashurst is we tried to start training the partners on that below-the-line thing, having set the scene with a bit above the line. So I'm just going to flick forward. One of the ways we try always, you've seen a slide before lunch, we came to project management, on how analysis is being done in order to look at clients and see how much better information can drive the way you manage that client. But you also need to set it in the context of you and your peers and your other clients. And in fact, about 5 years ago, this is the sort of thing we started doing to really focus partners on what it is they needed to do better. And so we said, right, okay, going back to that slide, we said leverage is important, and we said the recovery rate is important, and we analysed our top clients, and we produced this bubble chart. And we said, right, every one of our clients, our top 50 clients is on this chart, and the 2 axes are the leverage and the recovery rate, and the size of the bubble is the client's overall billings, and the colour tells you whether they are profitable or not. And as you can see, I'll come back to how do you decide what is a profitable client. We said, is this a profitable client that is going to produce a sort of profit that would enable us to pay $700,000 a partner? And we built that in as well. And so this is just a very simple way of getting across and saying to the partners with those nice big blue bubbles up at the top right, well done, keep on doing what you're doing. But saying to the guys with the red bubbles, right, we need to go back and have a look and see what it is that we're doing. So just going back. So we said, right, there's the recovery rate, there's the leverage, and what we need to start doing is getting better, in particular at project management, but also about negotiating, because what we felt quite strongly was that in order to react to fixed prices, there are 3 key things you need to do. You need to understand your finances better. You need to project manage the work that you're doing for the clients. But you also need to develop your negotiating skills. I don't know if you've tried negotiating with lawyers. They're generally not as good as their clients. And it's all about negotiating right from the start all the way through to the end. Projects go off the rails. Of course they do. But negotiating as you go along and explaining to the client what's happened. And I remember I asked you a question when we were talking on the phone earlier. How often does a law firm come to you at the end? And maybe as part of the negotiation, saying, we've just done this bit of work for you. Can we just sit down for half an hour and see, can we talk to you? How can we do it better next time? How can we actually do it quicker? How can we do it cheaper for you next time? What can we do differently? And that has 2 great advantages. One is you might actually do it next time more efficiently and cheaper for the client. But secondly, you're actually putting in their mind already the idea that it's going to be you that gets the next job. So I think you're on a bit of a win-win with that. So we certainly were focusing on analysing by client and by practice area. And at the client level, of course, once you move above the matter level, you've got all of these factors. I'm not going to read them all out. You know what a lot of them are. But it is amazing how many people, how many partners will look at this and will only focus on the matter level stuff and not take this into account when looking at the profitability. If there's one thing that I'm actually quite proud of having achieved at Ashurst over 16 years, it's resisting all pressure to report on profit by partner. Because what we wanted to do was to focus on profit by client, profit by work type, profit by practice area, whatever, and not get right down to the individual level. So that's certainly one of the things when I look at how do you scope and cost matters and measure profitability, that's one of the things we felt worked well for us in terms of collegiality and getting partners to focus on the client rather than their own matter-by-matter performance. How can they be more creative in how they price jobs? Does anyone really think that the word is creative? Of course, what clients really want is cheaper. I think creative is just a nicer way of saying we want the same for less. So we've talked a lot about understanding the finances and, of course, reviewing the processes. One of the things we did at Ashurst was we said, right, there are basically 9 common ways that we can price jobs in terms of caps, in terms of estimates, in terms of fixes, in terms of, I don't know if any of you come across, we want a blended rate. And we said, right, these are all the different areas. What are the advantages from our point of view? What are the disadvantages from the client's point of view of these? And what are the things that we can do to make it easy when we're negotiating on these in order to get them right? And better training in negotiation skills so that the partners have the confidence. Because you can give them all the financial information, but if they go in and they do things in the same old way, then the client will just say, I want to do it for less. They'll do it exactly the way they've always done it before and just accept the fact they get a slightly lower margin on it and rely on the fact that they're either putting up their charging rates, as you said, or they are getting more work or working their people harder. Calculating the upside and downside risk, I can tell you a horror story. We decided we would share the pain with clients, and we said, look, we're going to advise you on this type of transaction. We will share a bit of the risk with you. On these types of transactions, we're going to do the first exchange of letters for free. And we did this on the basis that that was going to cost around £10,000 worth of our time, and that the client we were advising was one of only 2 out there offering this product to its clients, so we knew that it was a 50-50 success rate, and that if these transactions proceeded, we would be billing in the region of 200,000. That seems a very reasonable risk, but what we didn't do was we didn't clearly identify the critical risks and minimize them and build them in and say, that holds as long as there are only 2 people in this market. And within about 4 months, there were 10 banks offering this. Our client success rate went down to about 1 in 15, and that meant we did 14. And by the time we'd done 14, oh, and by the way, the other thing is because all the others came into the market, the first part of the process became much more complicated. People were trying to put more in, and so it was costing us something like £35,000 for each one of these. And so we did 14 of those on the trot and wrote off the time. And the client then won the 15th, just after we'd said at the end of the 14th, we're not doing this for you anymore, and they went to another firm. So please do understand the risks. And you've got to think, I mean, also, sorry, I'm telling you the horror stories. I can also tell you that another client came to us and, of course, said, we can't quite afford your fees at the moment. We'd like to continue using you. Can we pay you in shares? And the finance director, that twit, said, no, we don't do that. I can't tell you how many millions those shares are now worth. But I can also think of many others where we were quite right to turn them down. But anyway, but encourage consultation. I find it astonishing how many partners operate in isolation on these things and don't actually talk it over with other partners or come and talk to the finance team. One of the things that I banged on for 5-6 years was we need to embed some of these skills within the departments. We need pricing people within the department, not centrally. We need project managers within the departments. We need pricing managers. We need finance managers within the departments. The trouble was at the time we had about, I think it was 11 different practice areas at Ashurst, and persuading management that we have 11 different accountants, 11 different pricing people in each department was just beyond dreams. So it really only became possible about 2 years ago when we really focused on having 4 divisions, and I'm pleased to say that Ben is the result of that. So he's joined and he heads up one of the divisions, and just by he can talk to you more about what he does, but just by having that within the area makes one hell of a difference. But you've still got to have central control. You still feel controlled centrally, don't you?
Always, yeah.
Good. I didn't prep him with that answer. That is a genuine answer. The pricing structures for local versus international clients. I don't have an answer. This is one of the most difficult things. When I joined Ashurst, there were 30 partners, and we had a London office, and that was it. And it was easy. We had international clients, but we just charged them London rates in sterling, and it was as simple as that. Unfortunately, by the time I left, we had, 26 offices, and God knows how many different currencies. And you've got clients who are saying, well, your office in Paris is charging us X, and your office in Brisbane is charging us Y in a different currency. And if I look at the latest exchange rate, and I really don't have an answer for that, but again, it's about talking to the clients and explaining what and why we're at and what we might do to cope with that within their own systems. I don't think there's any one answer that I can give you that goes back to that question. If there's one thing I would suggest that you take away from today, it is about getting your partners better trained on project management and on negotiation in the round. There are too many firms, I think, out there who are focusing on pricing. They're giving them negotiating skills training. They're giving them project management skills or whatever. I think they've got to be taught in the round. What next for pricing? Again, one of the things I've been asked to comment on. When will things get back to normal, I heard a partner say to me just before I left Ashurst. When will things get back to normal? Will we ever see the good old days again, when we just build based on hourly rates? Actually, one of the questions you were asked this morning is what proportion of your work is on a fixed fee basis. I was astonished at the response to that. I expected a much higher proportion of fixed fee work to come out this morning's question, and because in fact I asked for that question to be asked, and I was surprised at the answer. But when we just build based on hourly rates, and some people talk about those as the good old days. I suggest to you that, in fact, the good old days probably were even before that. How long have we actually been doing time recording and based all our billing on the basis of an hourly rate and a charge rate? Really only since we introduced computers and started getting everyone to record their time. Before that, we actually took account of the value we gave. We took account of the importance of the matter, and we took account of the level of expertise brought to bear, and to a certain extent built that into our pricing. I'm going to leave you with a quote from Oscar Wilde, which probably many of you know, a man who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. You were talking about the value that we give. Can I just flag for you that, in fact, that's not the full quote. He does go on to say, I sometimes feel that partners might be just a tad sentimental and do see an absurd value in what they provide and don't actually know the marketplace of any single thing.